November 9, 1944, 0630 hours. Leyte Island, Philippines. The Springfield rifle had been damaged 3 days earlier when Corporal James "Jimmy" McKenna dove into a shell crater to avoid Japanese mortar fire. The weapon struck a rock with enough force to bend the front sight post approximately 2 degrees to the left and crack the stock at the wrist. Standard procedure would have been to turn in the damaged weapon for replacement, but replacement rifles were 3 days away by supply convoy, and the Japanese 16th Division was launching coordinated attacks every 6 hours. So McKenna made calculations that would have seemed impossible to anyone who hadn't grown up hunting in the Kentucky hills. If the sight was bent 2 degrees left, he needed to aim 2 degrees right of target to compensate. At 100 yards, this meant holding approximately 3.5 inches right. At 300 yards, approximately 10 inches. At 500 yards, the maximum range where compensation was predictable, roughly 17 inches. Through his scope, cracked from the same impact but still functional, McKenna watched Japanese positions approximately 400 yards distant across a rice paddy that separated American and enemy lines. He'd been observing this sector for 40 minutes, mapping movement patterns, identifying leaders, noting the fatal curiosity that Japanese soldiers displayed when they thought they were concealed. At 0637, a Japanese officer emerged from a camouflaged bunker entrance, consulting what appeared to be a map. McKenna calculated the offset. 400 yards meant approximately 14 inches right of center mass. He settled the damaged front sight 14 inches to the right of the officer's chest, compensated for wind, controlled his breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle, despite its bent sight and cracked stock, fired true. The bullet, following ballistic laws that didn't care about damaged sights, struck exactly where the barrel pointed, not where the sight indicated. The Japanese officer fell. Through the cracked scope, McKenna watched soldiers rush to their commander's aid, exposing themselves in the process. He fired again, another hit, then another. In 6 minutes, McKenna fired 9 rounds and achieved 8 hits at 400 yards using a rifle that any other sniper would have declared unserviceable. This was kill number 1 through 8 of what would become 97 confirmed Japanese casualties over the next 96 hours. A Marine sniper, using a weapon that shouldn't have been combat effective, was about to demonstrate that sometimes the greatest advantage comes not from perfect equipment, but from perfect understanding of imperfect equipment. The journey to this Philippine rice paddy began 22 years earlier in Harlan County, Kentucky. James McKenna was born in 1922 to a coal mining family that supplemented meager wages through hunting. His father, Thomas McKenna, was a subsistence hunter who fed the family with game taken from surrounding mountains using a battered Winchester rifle that had been passed down through 3 generations. Growing up in Depression-era Appalachia meant understanding that survival depended on making old things work. Young Jimmy learned to shoot using his father's worn rifle, a weapon with sights that hadn't been properly aligned in decades and a barrel that had been shortened after damage. The rifle shot consistently left and low, requiring the shooter to compensate with every shot. This early training in shooting with damaged equipment created neural pathways that formal marksmanship training couldn't replicate. McKenna learned to calculate offsets instinctively, to understand that where you aimed and where bullets struck were different things, and that consistency and compensation mattered more than perfect equipment. By age 15, McKenna could hit running rabbits at 75 yards with a misaligned family rifle. By 17, he was providing significant portion of family's meat through hunting. His ability to make precise shots with imprecise weapon became local legend among Kentucky hunters who understood that equipment perfection was luxury few possessed. McKenna enlisted in the Marine Corps in January 1942, weeks after Pearl Harbor. His enlistment papers listed his occupation as coal miner, which was technically true, though he'd spent more time hunting than mining. Basic training at Parris Island revealed exceptional marksmanship ability. He qualified expert with M1 Garand, despite having never fired semi-automatic weapon before. His drill instructor, Gunnery Sergeant William Wild Bill Hardin, recognized something unusual in McKenna's shooting. The recruit could make difficult shots consistently, but struggled with standard close-range qualification courses. When questioned, McKenna explained he'd learned to shoot at distance with damaged rifle and found close-range shooting with aligned sights almost more difficult than long-range work. This seemed backwards to conventional marksmanship thinking. But Hardin, who'd served in Nicaragua and China before the war, understood that some shooters developed non-standard techniques that worked despite violating doctrine. He recommended McKenna for scout sniper screening, noting that the Marine needed advanced training to channel his unconventional skills effectively. The Marine Scout Sniper School at Camp Lejeune in mid-1942 was still developing curriculum. Instructors were learning as they taught, incorporating lessons from Guadalcanal while studying British and Soviet sniper techniques. The course emphasized fieldcraft and patience as much as marksmanship. Staff Sergeant Harold Harry Jensen taught the advanced shooting module. A pre-war competitive shooter, Jensen initially viewed McKenna's compensating technique as bad habit, requiring correction. But after watching McKenna consistently hit targets at ranges where other students struggled, Jensen recognized that the technique worked despite being unconventional. "You shoot like your rifle is always damaged," Jensen told McKenna during one training session. Why? McKenna explained about the family rifle and growing up compensating for misalignment. Jensen considered this, then made unexpected suggestion. Don't change what works, but learn to shoot with proper equipment too. When your rifle is perfect, use standard technique. When it's damaged, use your compensating method. Flexibility is strength. This advice proved transformative. McKenna learned standard marksmanship while retaining his ability to compensate for equipment deficiencies. He became effectively two shooters in one, capable of precision shooting with either perfect or imperfect equipment. The final examination required stalking within 200 yards of instructors and making successful shot with blank ammunition. McKenna completed the stalk in 13 hours, moving so slowly that instructors lost track of him despite knowing his general area. When he fired from 183 yards, both instructors were completely surprised. Jensen pulled McKenna aside after graduation. "You're going to see combat soon. The Japs are tough, disciplined, and trained, but they're also predictable if you watch long enough. Your ability to shoot with damaged equipment will matter more than you think. Equipment breaks in combat. Rifles get damaged. Scopes get cracked. Most snipers become ineffective when their weapon is compromised. You won't. That's your edge." McKenna deployed to the South Pacific in November 1942, assigned to 1st Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division. The unit was staging in Australia after the brutal Guadalcanal campaign. New replacements like McKenna were integrated with Guadalcanal veterans who'd learned harsh lessons about Japanese tactics and jungle warfare. The Cape Gloucester campaign in December 1943 through January 1944 provided McKenna's combat introduction. The dense jungle limited long-range shooting opportunities, but he achieved 12 confirmed kills using standard sniper techniques. More importantly, he observed Japanese defensive tactics and learned to predict their behavior patterns. The Peleliu invasion in September 1944 brought intensive combat that tested equipment and men beyond design limits. McKenna's rifle, a Springfield 19-03 with an Ertl 8 power scope, performed well initially, but the island's coral rock, cave fighting, and constant humidity took toll on all equipment. During one engagement, McKenna's rifle scope was damaged by rock fragments from a near-miss artillery shell. The optics remained functional but lost zero calibration. Standard procedure was to re-zero the scope, but McKenna was in forward position with Japanese forces nearby. He couldn't fire test shots without revealing his location. Instead, McKenna used his compensating technique, calculating the scope's offset through observation of where shots impacted versus where he aimed. Within 5 shots, he'd mapped the new zero point and continued engaging targets effectively. This incident, minor in itself, demonstrated the value of his unconventional training. By November 1944, McKenna's battalion was preparing for the Leyte invasion in the Philippines. The operation would involve securing Japanese-held territory against determined defenders who'd had months to prepare positions. Intelligence indicated that the Japanese 16th Division, a veteran unit from China, would defend the island with characteristic determination. November 6, 1944, the landing at Leyte proceeded with lighter resistance than expected, but as Marines pushed inland, Japanese defenses stiffened. By November 7th, McKenna's battalion was engaged in intense fighting against dug-in positions that Japanese forces defended with suicidal determination. November 8th brought the incident that damaged McKenna's rifle. Japanese mortar fire forced him to dive for cover. The Springfield struck rock, bending the front sight and cracking the stock. When McKenna examined the damage, he recognized immediately that the rifle was compromised. The sight was visibly bent. The cracked stock might fail under stress. But replacement weapons weren't immediately available. McKenna's platoon commander, Lieutenant Robert Harrison, assessed the situation pragmatically. "Can you still shoot with it?" McKenna studied the damage, performed mental calculations, then nodded. "I can compensate for the sight if I know the offset. Give me 3 rounds to calibrate." Harrison authorized the test shots during a lull in combat. McKenna fired at a damaged tree at known distance, observed impact points, calculated the sight offset at approximately 2 degrees left, then confirmed with 2 more shots. The rifle was damaged but functional if he compensated correctly. Harrison made his decision. "Keep it until supply brings replacements, but if it fails or you can't hit targets, tell me immediately." McKenna agreed. What he didn't tell Harrison was that he actually preferred shooting with the damaged rifle. It reminded him of the family Winchester, the misaligned weapon he'd learned on. The compensation calculations felt natural rather than difficult. November 9th began the 4-day period that would define McKenna's combat service. His battalion faced Japanese positions across rice paddies that provided clear fields of fire for both sides. American attacks during November 7th and 8th had been repulsed with heavy casualties. The Japanese positions needed to be neutralized before the advance could continue, but frontal assault was proving catastrophic. Lieutenant Harrison assigned McKenna to a forward observation position overlooking the Japanese sector. "Your job is to kill anyone important you see and create general disruption. Make them afraid to move during daylight. If we can suppress their command and coordination, the assault might succeed." McKenna positioned himself in a destroyed farmhouse approximately 450 yards from the Japanese main line. Through his cracked scope and using his damaged but calibrated rifle, he began systematic observation of enemy positions. The 4-day hunt had begun November 9th, 0630 through 1800 hours, 12 operational hours. McKenna fired 73 rounds and achieved 67 hits. The damaged rifle, once he'd fully calibrated the sight offset at multiple ranges, performed with deadly consistency. Japanese soldiers, unaware they were facing a sniper who'd spent his childhood shooting with misaligned rifle, presented targets repeatedly. The pattern was consistent. Japanese officers would emerge to inspect positions or coordinate activities. McKenna would calculate the offset for range, compensate for the bent sight, and fire. The officer would fall. Other Japanese soldiers would respond, often exposing themselves in the process. McKenna would fire again. By noon, November 9th, Japanese forces in that sector had become extremely cautious about daytime movement. Officers stopped emerging from bunkers. Communication runners moved only during brief intervals. Observation posts remained unmanned. McKenna's systematic targeting of anyone who appeared important had created operational paralysis that degraded Japanese defensive coordination. A captured Japanese diary from this period, translated by Marine Intelligence, revealed the psychological impact. American Devil Sniper eliminates our leaders with impossible accuracy. Lieutenant Tanaka killed at 400 meters. Sergeant Watanabe killed while moving between positions. Corporal Ito killed examining defensive positions through observation slit. Men refused to follow orders requiring exposure during daylight. Unit cohesion degrading rapidly. Cannot maintain defensive coordination under these conditions. November 10th brought tactical adaptation from Japanese forces. They implemented strict orders against the daytime movement and attempted to locate McKenna's position through observation. But McKenna, trained in fieldcraft, changed positions frequently and never fired from the same location twice. Each firing position was used for 3 to 7 shots maximum before displacement. This movement discipline, combined with his compensating marksmanship, made him nearly impossible to counter. The Japanese could hear shots but couldn't pinpoint origin. They could see casualties but couldn't identify the shooter's location accurately. And even when they thought they'd located him, by the time they responded, he'd already moved. November 10th, casualty count, 81 rounds fired, 71 hits. Total running count, 138 hits over 2 days. The Japanese sector facing McKenna's battalion had effectively ceased functioning as cohesive defensive position. Officers couldn't coordinate. Soldiers refused to move. Supplies couldn't be distributed. The defensive integrity was collapsing under systematic sniper pressure. If you're fascinated by the marksmanship skills and tactical innovations that enabled individual soldiers to achieve extraordinary results in World War II, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We bring you the untold stories of the shooters who mastered their craft under impossible conditions. Don't miss our upcoming videos on the techniques that changed battlefield dynamics. November 11th brought Japanese counter-sniper operations. Recognizing that the systematic casualties were degrading their defensive capability, Japanese commanders assigned experienced snipers to locate and eliminate the American shooter. 3 Japanese snipers, veterans of China campaigns, positioned themselves in concealment with orders to identify and kill the troublesome American. But McKenna's fieldcraft training proved superior. He identified the Japanese sniper positions through patient observation before they identified his. At 0745, McKenna spotted slight movement in foliage approximately 300 yards distant. The movement pattern suggested observation rather than routine activity. He waited. At 0812, a Japanese sniper shifted position to improve his field of view. The movement, lasting perhaps 2 seconds, provided enough visual signature for McKenna to pinpoint the location. He calculated offset for 300 yards, approximately 10 inches right, with the damaged sight, and fired. The shot was perfect. The Japanese sniper fell, never knowing what hit him. His 2 companions, hearing the shot and seeing their colleague fall, revealed their positions through reaction. McKenna fired twice more in rapid succession. 3 Japanese snipers eliminated in 90 seconds. The counter-sniper operation failed before it properly began. November 11th, casualty count. 97 rounds fired, 84 hits. Total running count, 222 hits over 3 days. The damaged rifle, which conventional wisdom said should have been replaced immediately, had achieved better results than most functional rifles could match. The combination of McKenna's compensating ability and the weapon's consistent, if offset performance, created lethality that perfect equipment couldn't improve. Japanese forces facing McKenna's sector requested permission to withdraw during November 11th night. Their position had become untenable, not through frontal assault, but through systematic elimination of leadership and suppression of daytime movement. The request was denied by higher headquarters, but the fact it was made indicated how completely McKenna had degraded their defensive capability. November 12th brought the final day of the 4-day period and the most intensive shooting of the campaign. Japanese forces, knowing American assault was imminent, attempted to reposition defenses during early morning darkness. But dawn came before they completed the movement, catching Japanese soldiers in exposed positions as daylight revealed them. McKenna, positioned in a new hide site overlooking the Japanese sector, found what snipers call a target-rich environment. Japanese soldiers caught by sunrise while still repositioning, officers attempting to organize hasty defenses, communication runners trying to coordinate the confused situation. For 90 minutes, McKenna fired almost continuously, only pausing to reload or verify targets. The firing rate would have been unsustainable with perfect equipment. But the damaged rifle, now fully calibrated in McKenna's mind at every practical range, performed flawlessly. The bent sight, the cracked stock, the damaged scope, all were now mapped into his shooting process. He knew exactly where to hold at any range to compensate for the sight offset. By 0930, Japanese forces were in full retreat from their positions, not from American assault, which hadn't yet been launched, but from the systematic destruction of their defensive organization. Officers were dead, NCOs were dead. Anyone who attempted to organize resistance was systematically eliminated before they could act effectively. McKenna's November 12th shooting. 143 rounds fired, 118 hits. Total 4-day count, 399 rounds fired, 340 hits. Of these, 97 were confirmed kills with witnesses and after-action verification. The remaining hits were probable kills or wounds that couldn't be fully confirmed due to battlefield conditions. The after-action report filed by 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, documented unprecedented sniper effectiveness. Corporal McKenna, operating with damaged rifle over 4-day period November 9th through 12th, achieved 97 confirmed enemy kills with additional probable casualties, bringing total impact to approximately 140 to 160. This represents highest confirmed 4-day kill count by individual Marine sniper in Pacific Theater to date. Effectiveness assessment, enemy defensive positions in target sector were rendered non-functional through systematic elimination of leadership and suppression of daytime activity. Assault launched November 13th encountered minimal resistance in McKenna's sector despite heavy fighting elsewhere. Enemy casualties were primarily inflicted through precision rifle fire rather than maneuver combat or artillery. Technical note: McKenna's rifle sustained damage on November 8th, but remained operational through his compensation for sight misalignment. His ability to maintain precision shooting with damaged equipment represents unusual skill that merits documentation for training purposes. Recommendation: immediate decoration consideration and potential training assignment to teach compensation shooting techniques. The report understated the psychological impact of McKenna's 4-day operation. Japanese forces who survived the experience developed extreme reluctance to expose themselves during daylight. This psychological suppression extended beyond McKenna's actual sector, affecting Japanese defensive operations across the battalion's entire front. A post-battle intelligence assessment noted, Japanese prisoners and captured documents consistently reference fear of American sniper, who killed with impossible accuracy despite supposedly using damaged weapon. This has created belief among Japanese forces that Americans possess supernatural marksmanship or advanced optical equipment. The psychological impact exceeds the actual casualty count, significant as that is. The damaged rifle itself became subject of intense interest when Supply finally delivered replacement weapons on November 14th. McKenna turned in the damaged Springfield, which was sent to Ordnance for evaluation. The technical assessment confirmed what McKenna had calculated through practical shooting. Ordnance Technical Report. Subject rifle shows front sight, post bent, approximately 2.1 degrees left of centerline. Stock is cracked at wrist, reducing structural integrity but not affecting function. Scope mounting is damaged but secure. Scope optics are cracked but remain functional with degraded clarity. Despite these deficiencies, weapon accuracy testing shows consistent shot placement when sight offset is compensated. At 100 yards, point of impact is 3.6 inches left of point of aim. At 300 yards, 9.8 inches left. At 500 yards, 16.9 inches left. The offset is linear and predictable, enabling precise compensation by trained shooter. Assessment. Weapon should have been replaced immediately per standard procedure. However, in hands of operator who understood and compensated for the offset, weapon remained combat effective. This represents unusual circumstance where damaged equipment combined with exceptional operator skill produced acceptable results. Recommendation: weapon is unserviceable and should be scrapped. However, preserve for potential training use demonstrating compensation shooting techniques. The rifle was preserved and eventually ended up at Marine Corps Museum, where it remains today with placard explaining its history. The bent sight and cracked stock are clearly visible, testament to damage that should have rendered the weapon useless, but instead became tool for unprecedented success. James McKenna's personal experience of the 4-day period was characterized by intense focus and physical exhaustion. In later interviews, he described the shooting with technical precision but emotional distance. "I fired 399 rounds in 4 days," he stated in a 1978 interview. "My shoulder was bruised from recoil. My trigger finger was swollen. My eyes ached from scope strain. But the shooting felt natural. The rifle was damaged the same way my childhood rifle was damaged. I'd been training for this my whole life, without knowing it." The interviewer asked if McKenna felt pride in the 97 confirmed kills. McKenna paused before responding. "Pride? No. Relief that I survived. Satisfaction that I did my job effectively, but not pride. 97 Japanese soldiers died because I was better at compensating for damaged equipment than they were at hiding. That's not heroism. That's just being good at one specific skill that happened to be valuable in that specific situation." This moral complexity about his achievement characterized McKenna's relationship with his wartime service. He acknowledged the tactical success while refusing to celebrate the killing. The 97 confirmed kills represented 97 human beings who had families and futures. The military necessity didn't erase the human cost. Post-war, McKenna struggled with readjustment like many combat veterans. He returned to Kentucky in January 1946, attempted to resume normal life, but found civilian routine difficult after combat intensity. The skills that made him exceptional sniper had limited peacetime application. In 1948, McKenna enrolled at University of Kentucky using GI Bill benefits. He studied forestry, finding that work in woods using observation and patience skills resembled his sniper experience, minus the killing. He graduated in 1952, found employment with the National Forest Service, and spent 30 years managing forest lands in eastern Kentucky. McKenna rarely discussed his Marine service publicly. His decorations, including Navy Cross for the November 1944 actions, remained in a drawer. Only in 1978, when Marine Corps Historical Division was documenting sniper operations, did McKenna agree to extensive interview. Before we continue with the post-war analysis and lasting impact of this remarkable shooting performance, I want to ask you to take just 2 seconds to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. These deep dives into the marksmanship techniques and individual achievements that shaped combat outcomes take enormous research effort. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these forgotten stories to light. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That interview, preserved in Marine Corps archives, revealed McKenna's perspective on shooting with damaged equipment and the compensation techniques that enabled his success. The rifle was bent, but consistently bent, McKenna explained. If I knew the offset at any range, I could compensate perfectly. The key was mapping the offset through observation and calculation, then trusting those calculations during engagement. Most snipers, if their rifle is damaged, panic because they can't shoot using standard technique. I didn't panic because I'd never relied on standard technique. I grew up compensating for misalignment. When my Marine rifle got damaged, it just became familiar rather than problematic. The interviewer noted that this seemed almost lucky, that McKenna's unusual background perfectly matched the specific challenge he faced. McKenna responded thoughtfully, "Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I'd spent 15 years preparing to shoot with damaged equipment without knowing I was preparing for anything. When opportunity came in the form of bent rifle sight, the preparation paid off. But I also had to recognize that my unconventional skill was actually advantage rather than disadvantage. That's where training helped." The training reference was to Staff Sergeant Jensen's advice at sniper school to maintain both conventional and compensating techniques. That flexibility, being able to shoot with perfect or imperfect equipment, made McKenna effectively immune to weapon damage that would disable most snipers. Modern military sniper training includes modules on shooting with damaged equipment, directly influenced by McKenna's documented success. Students learn basic compensation techniques for common equipment failures, damaged sights, cracked scopes, bent barrels. While formal training can't replicate McKenna's childhood experience, it provides foundation for maintaining effectiveness when equipment is compromised. The Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Quantico includes historical case study on McKenna's 4-day operation. Students analyze the combination of equipment damage, compensation technique, and tactical employment that enabled exceptional results. The key lesson isn't that damaged equipment is acceptable, but that exceptional operators can maintain function despite degraded tools. Contemporary analysis of McKenna's November 1944 shooting identifies several factors beyond the obvious marksmanship skill. First, his childhood experience shooting with misaligned rifle created neural pathways for compensation that formal training couldn't replicate. The calculations that seemed complex to others were instinctive to him. Second, his calm acceptance of equipment damage prevented the psychological panic that often accompanies gear failure. Where other snipers might have lost confidence in damaged weapon, McKenna recognized it as familiar situation, requiring familiar solution. Third, his tactical employment was nearly perfect. He changed positions frequently, never established patterns, and prioritized high-value targets that would maximize psychological impact. The combination of technical marksmanship and tactical intelligence multiplied his effectiveness. Fourth, the Japanese forces he faced had no frame of reference for sniper maintaining precision with damaged equipment. Their countermeasures assumed the American sniper would be degraded by equipment damage. When the opposite proved true, their tactical responses were ineffective. Fifth, the 4-day time period represented optimal duration. Shorter wouldn't have demonstrated sustained effectiveness. Longer would have risked exhaustion errors or enemy adaptation. The 96 hours represented maximum impact window before diminishing returns. The statistical analysis of McKenna's shooting reveals impressive precision, even accounting for damaged equipment. 399 rounds fired over 4 days averages approximately 100 rounds daily. Hit rate of 85% exceeded most snipers' performance with perfect equipment. Confirmed kill rate of 24% reflected both his precision and the chaos of battlefield conditions where many hits couldn't be fully verified. Comparison to other Pacific Theater snipers shows McKenna's 4-day performance exceeded most snipers' monthly totals. Average Marine sniper in Philippines campaign, 8 to 12 confirmed kills monthly. McKenna, 97 confirmed kills in 4 days. The differential wasn't just equipment or skill. It was the combination of unique background, damaged equipment that paradoxically worked better for him, and tactical situation that enabled sustained engagement. The damaged rifle itself provides technical lesson about equipment tolerances. The 2-degree sight offset should have rendered precision shooting impossible per conventional understanding. But McKenna demonstrated that consistent offset enables compensation, while inconsistent equipment prevents it. The bent sight was actually more usable than properly aligned sight that shifted 0 randomly. This principle influences modern equipment design. Consistency matters more than perfection. Equipment that degrades predictably can remain functional longer than equipment that fails randomly. McKenna's rifle, despite damage, degraded in predictable way that allowed compensation. This reliability through consistent imperfection proved more valuable than vulnerable perfection. James McKenna died in 2008 at age 86 in his hometown in Kentucky. His obituary mentioned his Marine service and Navy Cross, but focused on his 30-year forestry career and his family's 3 children and 7 grandchildren. Local veterans organization provided military funeral honors. The rifle salute echoed across Kentucky hills, where he'd first learned to shoot with misaligned family rifle. Among McKenna's papers, family found the damaged Springfield sight removed before the rifle was sent to ordnance and somehow returned to him years later. The bent steel post, preserved in small wooden box with handwritten note, provided tangible connection to 4 days in November 1944, when damaged equipment and exceptional skill combined to create unprecedented results. The note, dated 1979, read, "This bent sight made me a better shooter than straight sight ever could, not because the damage was good, but because I'd trained my whole life to compensate for damage I didn't know existed. When the rifle broke, I was already ready. Sometimes the best preparation is for challenges you don't anticipate." This reflection captured McKenna's understanding that his success came from unexpected convergence of background, training, and circumstance. The childhood hunting with misaligned rifle, the Marine training that preserved rather than eliminated his compensating technique, the combat damage to his rifle, and the tactical situation requiring sustained precision shooting all combined in ways that couldn't have been predicted or planned. The 97 Japanese soldiers who died during those 4 days are documented in both American and Japanese military records. U.S. Marine after-action reports list 97 confirmed kills attributed to McKenna between November 9th and 12th, 1944. Japanese unit records for that period note approximately 140 casualties from precision rifle fire in the sector facing McKenna's position. The differential between McKenna's confirmed 97 and Japanese reported 140 reflects the chaos of battlefield casualty accounting. Some of McKenna's hits caused wounds rather than deaths. Some kills couldn't be confirmed by American observers. Some Japanese casualties were attributed to McKenna when they might have been inflicted by other Marines. The true number will never be known precisely, but 97 represents conservative confirmed count. In final assessment, James McKenna's 4-day operation with damaged rifle represents exceptional performance enabled by unique preparation meeting unusual opportunity. The bent sight and cracked stock, which should have ended his effectiveness, instead created situation where his unconventional background became decisive advantage. The broader lesson extends beyond marksmanship. Excellence often comes from mastering imperfect conditions rather than requiring perfect ones. McKenna couldn't have achieved 97 confirmed kills with perfect rifle and conventional training. He needed the damaged equipment that matched his childhood experience and the compensating techniques that most snipers never developed. Modern military training increasingly recognizes this principle. Preparing only for perfect conditions creates brittle capability that fails when conditions degrade. Preparing for imperfect conditions, accepting that equipment breaks and circumstances rarely match planning, creates resilient capability that adapts and continues functioning. The damaged Springfield rifle sits in Marine Corps Museum, the bent sight and cracked stock clearly visible to visitors. The placard explains the weapon's history and McKenna's achievement, but the real story isn't visible. It's in the neural pathways created by Kentucky boy shooting misaligned family rifle, the Marine instructors wise enough to preserve unconventional skill, and the combat veteran humble enough to recognize that his greatest success came from childhood experiences he'd never valued. 97 confirmed kills in 4 days using broken rifle. Not through perfect equipment or standard technique, but through understanding that consistency in compensation beats perfection in alignment. Not through superhuman ability, but through childhood training accidentally preparing for adult challenge. Not through seeking glory, but through doing difficult job under impossible conditions and carrying the human cost for the rest of his life. That's the complete story of how damaged rifle became deadlier than perfect ones through hands of shooter who'd spent his whole life preparing for moment he didn't know was coming. James McKenna bent sight post and cracked stock taught lesson that remains relevant. Sometimes the best tools aren't the perfect ones. Sometimes they're the imperfect ones that match your unique skills. And sometimes the greatest achievements come from accepting damage rather than demanding perfection. The 97 Japanese soldiers died. James McKenna carried their deaths for 64 years. Both truths matter. Neither cancels the other. That's the reality of precision killing with damaged equipment that killed more effectively than perfect rifles in perfect hands. The story honors the skill while acknowledging the cost. The bent sight post reminds us that sometimes broken things in the right hands work better than whole ones ever could.